Member for Katherine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise to speak on the Bail and Youth Justice Legislation Amendment Bill. But I'd firstly like to offer my sincere condolences to the family of Linford Fake and the broader community that are mourning the loss of a loved one and dedicated community member. In fact, when at the Nightcliff markets on Sundays, I would pop into the store. Since the tragic loss, I've heard community members saying it was a very friendly supermarket, known for their fresh produce and friendly service, and I would wholeheartedly agree, Madam Speaker. The horrific event that should never have occurred at Nightcliff last Wednesday, resulting in the loss of a father, husband, grandfather and brother, is a tragedy that no family should have to endure, and the heartbreak the family is going through is beyond words. Our government was elected at the last election on a platform to reduce crime, rebuild our economy and restore our beautiful lifestyle that has been eroded over the last 8 years of Labor failures. I stand united with our CLP team in strong support of these bail amendments, which will further strengthen the amendments made in October 2024 to the Bail Act through Declan's Law. Within 8 weeks of coming to government, our CLP government introduced a suite of reforms, including Declan's Law, which saw stronger bail laws and knife-wielding powers, mandatory sentencing for assaults on workers, breach of bail reinstated as an offence for youths, public drinking laws strengthened, post and boast legislation that has seen 10 individuals charged already, ram raid legislation that has seen 19 youths charged and 5 adult offenders charged with these new offenders. Madam Speaker, there is much work to do, but while these measures are having a positive impact, they are only the beginning of what is needed to restore our community safety. And I just want to pick up on some comments that the member for Johnson read out on behalf of the member for Mulca, and that the government wasn't doing enough with two-way education and bilingual education. And I'd just like to put on the record, Madam Speaker, that we actually have 9 bilingual schools here in the Territory. 4 of those have celebrated 50 years, which is quite a feat in itself, Madam Speaker. And I went out to Shepparton last year to the bilingual to the Shepparton College, celebrating their 50 years of bilingual education. But I couldn't help be a little bit disappointed, congratulating them on the fact they've had 50 years, Madam Speaker, but disappointed that 30% attendance is about average for Shepparton College. And so this year, with the Better Fairer Schools Agreement, they get a considerable amount of extra funding. And I was talking to the principal at the time to say that I hope that that funding can go into increasing the attendance rates. And I know that Yuendamu also recently, the CEO of Education, has been down there to the 50 years of bilingual education. But whilst we have bilingual education, we have great educators, we have great Aboriginal people in schools, great schools to go to. It is not getting those students through the door, Madam Speaker, and that is part of the problem. So we need kids to attend school. They cannot get into meaningful employment and get educated if they do not attend school, and I'll speak about that a bit more later. So our government inherited a system that placed emphasis on the past trauma of offenders rather than concentrating on continued harm to our community and the rights of the victims. And it's frustrating that these reforms were not addressed under the previous government. As I've said, there is more work to do, and our government will continue to make sure that community safety is our #1 priority ongoing, which is why we are here today with Parliament being recalled. Territorians, no matter what age, gender or race, should not be subject to this terrorism from anyone, especially at the hands of those on bail for serious violent offences. These new changes to the Bail Act will prioritise community safety above all else, and bail will only be granted where courts decide that there is no risk to our community. We also require the courts and police to be satisfied to a high degree of confidence that an accused won't offend again or endanger the safety of the community before bail is granted. We will remove detention as a last resort principle for youth bail matters and remove the court's ability to consider the need to minimise the stigma to a youth resulting from being remanded in custody and create consistency between adult and youth bail tests. Our government will do, it is what our government will do that matters, Madam Speaker, and it is how our government will action this that actually matters. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about the crime statistics that whilst there has been a slight decrease in the crime statistics in Katherine in the latest crime statistics that were out, we also have seen, which has been great, that the police have been out there doing great work. Everyone's been doing a lot of work across since we have come to government. But we have seen, whilst there have been some small decreases with these statistics back in February, we have seen a spike again in Katherine just in the last month, Madam Speaker. I speak to people in my electorate each day, and it is clear that their fear of not feeling safe is escalating again in our community. And with this increase, our police resources are stretched and they are wondering what has to happen before changes are made. Katherine has been under siege recently with this spike in crime, and the impact on individuals is real, and the flow-on effect to our community is real. I myself have been a victim of intruders both in my workplace and home, and it certainly changes your perspective on how you live your life. Looking over your shoulder simply becomes normal. Well, in actual fact, Madam Speaker, it is not normal. It is far from normal to be worried about whether you're going to the shop and feeling safe. What time should you go to the shop? And we've spoken about that time and time again here in Parliament. It is not right. Just this morning, my daughter called me after she was out running, training for a marathon at 7 o'clock in the morning, just in one of the parks in Katherine, confronted by a group of youth. She said no more than 10 fronting up to her to punch her, and she was angry. She wasn't really scared, Madam Speaker, because fortunately she's probably got a little bit of her mother in her, and she's quite feisty, but she was really angry, and quite frankly, I can't even use the words that she used to me, but she was very annoyed about the fact that how dare they confront her while she's out running, training for her marathon. So I don't want my community to get back to the stage of where I'm here speaking to people in my community about leaving, having to sleep with baseball bats under their beds as they fear offenders coming to their home. Just last week, a long-time single female offender fended off a would-be offender with a shovel in her home. I can't even imagine how terrified she would have been, and I know that lady, so it would have been quite confronting. As I say, I do not want people in my community to leave because nothing was done, and the changes need to be made now, and the time to act is now, which is what we were here all doing today. More than often, we know these offences are being done by repeat offenders not once, not twice, but time and time again. They're getting out and repeating crimes on other people or at different places or homes. We saw this with the tragic loss of Mr. Feek. We also saw this with the young Aboriginal boy that was granted permission to go to his grandfather's funeral, and also in the case of Declan Laverty, and I note that Samara is here with us today. And as the member for Blaine spoke of in his contribution about Trevor, the senior that was brutally attacked recently. This does not pass community expectation, and so here we are strengthening the laws again to make sure the rights of the victim is above the right of the offender. I'm pleased to hear the opposition will support the Bail and Youth Justice Amendment Bill. We need whole-of-government coordination and investment in primary prevention, early intervention and consequences. Part of this early intervention is about getting kids to school, and this was an election commitment, Madam Speaker, to reintroduce school attendance officers that we enshrined into our legislation in the last sittings of Parliament. I note the member for Nightcliff spoke of education for children and evidence-based measures. Well, I want this too, and the Education Department has been doing a huge amount of work in this area each and every day. The school attendance officers are out on the streets every day speaking with youth and families and letting them know the importance of school for their children and also the consequence of not getting their child to school. And I've been out with those attendance officers right across the territory, Madam Speaker, and they are doing a fantastic job. And it is actual fact that these children to attend school, it is the law for kids to attend school. So how can we have them graduate school to a job with meaningful employment, as the member for Guadja spoke about, when their attendance is so poor? I've previously highlighted the intensive support role as well that students are on, and this sat separately to the other attendance rates under the previous government. Students on intensive support, Madam Speaker, are students that have not attended school for 20 days or more. Just this year, in April, the stats were there were 1,272 Aboriginal students on this intensive support, compared to the same period in 2024, where there were 1,735. This is a decrease of 463. I actually think I've got that round the wrong way. Sorry, Madam Speaker. 1,272 were there. In actual fact, there are now, 1,735 were there. There are now 1,272, which is a decrease of 463. The non-Aboriginal students on the roll was 69, compared to 77 in the same period last year, a decrease of 8. So there's been a lot of work done in this area, Madam Speaker, with the school attendance officers. We've seen in total 1,341 students on the intensive support, which is a decrease of 471 students compared to the same period in 2024 of 1,812 students. And that is all through a lot of hard work by those school attendance officers, Madam Speaker, that are working each and every day, as I've said, right across the Territory. And I actually have somewhere here. I just wanted to talk about some of the attendance rates. And the attendance rates, as I say, there are some slight increases. Increase is better than a decrease, Madam Speaker, but we still have a long way to go. And I just want to talk, in the member for Daly's electorate, in Pepperminardi, for example, in 2024, they had 53.5%. In 2025, for the same period, they have 58.6%. That is only a slight increase, but it's an increase nonetheless. And in a community like Pepperminardi, I say congratulations. At the Wooliana School, they had 53.7% last year, and at the same time this year, 58.2%. In Gapawiak School in the Arnhem electorate had 51.6% last year in term 1 of 2024, and this year they had 64.3%, which is a considerable improvement. Miliakbara School, they had 28.1% attendance rates, and theirs is 45.5%. So that's a considerable increase, but it's also new kids coming to school as well, Madam Speaker. And so again, that is the work of the attendance officers right across the Territory. And by talking to families and letting them know of the importance of getting their kids to school and the fact that there will potentially be a fine if they do not get their kids to school is certainly making a difference. So one thing I do want to bring to everyone's attention, which doesn't get spoken about that much, is the importance of parents and parent responsibility in raising their children. No child is born a criminal. And so therefore we must have parents more responsible and accountable for their child's upbringing. And each and every one of us in this chamber as an elected member has a responsibility to make sure that when they're going to their schools and when they're talking to parents, or if they see parents out there with their children not at school and they know them, you know, if you know them, go up and have a conversation with them about why is your child not at school. I mean, it is not a shameful thing to do. We are elected members in our community, and I know when I see parents that even if I don't know them, I go and have a conversation. Obviously, I'm not asking them, why aren't you at school straight away? I have a conversation with them because people are in from different areas for many reasons. They might be in for medical reasons, or you know, there might be something else going on that their child is not at school. But it's a great conversation to have, to just better engage yourself with those people in your community, and certainly speak to those families and let them know the importance of getting their child to school. And I'm sure, Member for Guadji, we're laughing at the fact of my abruptness probably in conversation. We need elders to speak up and acknowledge when they see bad behaviour. It takes a community to raise a child, as I've said, and there is no better time than now when we all need to band together for the future of our youth. Other early intervention that is happening in my community, and I know it's also happened down in Alice Springs, is the nightly patrollers meeting. This happens in Katherine Thursday to Sunday, bringing police, housing safety officers, Kalano Night Patrol and also the circuit breaker team together, discussing strategies for the upcoming night's patrol. This has been a great collaboration from all stakeholders to address the goings-on in the community, and it allows all of these departments to work together and this has seen a positive impact. And I've just heard from the Minister Carl earlier on speaking of that. I would just like to talk a little bit about the enrolments and the data that we've seen. Whilst, Madam Speaker, in the middle years there is a decline in enrolments, and I think we can all acknowledge that the middle years are a very trying time in an adolescent's life. And if we all think back to when we were there, I'm pretty sure we would all agree. So whilst the enrolments in that area were down, which is where a lot of work needs to happen, the preschool enrolments were up, primary years were up, and the senior years were up. So it's great to know that, you know, at the start and the end, we have great enrolment data happening in our schools. We just need to work on those middle years and get those kids to school. And again, that takes a lot of effort across the community, with schools, with attendance officers, with people out there in the community. And I just want to talk a little bit, Madam Speaker, about compliance activities. So whilst those school attendance officers are out working in the community, they have done 3,409 compliance activities comprising of 1,741 successful compliance visits. They've had 246 compliance notices, 21 compliance notices were failing to send the school by an independent student. So that's where the student is actually given the compliance notice as opposed to the family. 30 compliance notices for compulsory conference, 5 directions to enrol, and 134 revocation of compliance notices. There has been 36 infringement notices for failing to attend school by a parent, which is the fine of $370. 9 infringement notices for failing to attend schools have actually been given to students, which is only $37, not the $370. 1 infringement notice for failure to ensure enrolments by a parent, and 7 revocation of infringement notices. After initial discussions with parents, they understand that it is a law to send their children to school, and so, you know, those families are getting their children to school. So in comparison to the same reporting period in 2024, there's been an increase of 3,349 compliance activities undertaken across the NT. And I think that's important to note. Whilst there's a lot of compliance activities happening, we've seen slight increases in attendance. As I said, in middle years, we've seen a decrease. But there's certainly an understanding across the community, right across the territory, Madam Speaker, that parents 100% know that they should have their children at school. A lot more work needs to be done in that area. But they certainly know that there will be a fine if they do not send their child to school. And I commend the department and the school attendance officers and everyone working very hard with education at the moment to make sure that we get kids to attend school, because, as I said, if we don't get children in school, they can't get into meaningful employment at the end, Madam Speaker. So I'd like to thank members for their contribution. I'm pleased to see everyone that has contributed to support the amendments. Apart from the member for Johnson, who wishes to abstain, and I commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.